All right, I'm gonna do a couple of rings, one bronze and then another one silver. They'll be brazed together. What I want to do is I want to show how to do it cheaply with your own equipment and stuff like, or just cheap stuff, Harbor Freight or hardware store, little torch, or, and then on the second one, when I do the silver one, I'll use a acetylene torch. You could also use a propane torch, just you got to get a smaller tip for it, but this is a good way to do it. When I do this, I'm going to cut little bits of the solder, and I'm just using you could use a wire cutter, and this is just cutting it in little itty bitty chips. That was the bronze one. I'm going to use a ring sizing chart. I'm going to figure out the ring size I want, and then I'm going to go with a slightly smaller size. And I've already done that because I'm going to go ahead and texture it. And when I texture it, it's going to spread the metal. And so from there, for the bronze ring, we'll start out with 12 gauge bronze. I'm going to take my measurement. I've got this down in millimeters. Measure it out. Figure out what hand I'm using for what things. I'm probably going to bounce back and forth because my shoulder is still injured. Mark that. Put this back. And then I'm going to cut it. Now, when you're cutting it, you can use a flush cutter and have the cut side pretty flush on the inside. I can hear somebody in the background banging something. That's not me. But it still leaves a little bit of a rag on the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and file it, and I'm going to go ahead and drop this down, drop the camera down so that we can file the ends flush. Now I'll show you a better way.
Yeah. What was that length that you have cut off of the 12 gauge copper wire?
It's 12 gauge of bronze.
Oh, 12 gauge bronze.
Yeah. And
And what's the length?
60.6 millimeters.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm going to take a file. Oops, I don't want to move that phone any further than it already is. And I'm going to go and flatten the ends. So that end's flat. This end, I must have cut with a wire cutter. It's way off, so that'll take a moment. Another thing you can do, and I'll go over that in a moment, would be to take and coil the ring size you want over a mandrel, and then use a saw, like a jeweler saw or something, to cut straight through, cut both at once, and I'll show that. So take your ring, put it over a mandrel, and if I cut it straight like this, then the cuts will come up evenly against each other. When I go and bend this around on this piece, it's going to V and leave a gap. So I'm going to have to fiddle with that because I did it with just the taking the measurements and then cutting it and filing it flat. So I'm using homemade pliers. A lot of the tools on this first one, I'm going to use homemade. Actually, a lot of the tools on the second one, I'm still going to be made by me or somebody. So you can see here that it doesn't come up even. That's because they were filed flat. Once you bend it around, the inside is going to be same length as, it's going to be under compression and stuff, and you're going to end up with that V right there. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to move it back and forth a little bit. If I have to, move it in. I'm bracing my right arm so that way my right arm isn't under very much pressure. Still got a little bit of that gap. I'm going to pull these so that they're a little bit closer to flush. Pull that one in. Pull that one in. They're lined up all right. And then I'm going to move them back and forth a little. I've still got a little bit of a V there. I don't normally pound things on the desk here. I've just got a normal desk, but I'm going to put, so this is going to be my anvil, showing that you don't have to have big anvils or anything like that. I'm going to use a wooden mallet, which is just a piece of wood that I drilled a hole, took another dowel, cut a slot in it, tapped it down, put a piece of wood into the slot, tapped it down. Now I got a mallet. So I'm going to tap that down right there. Now, still got a little bit of a gap right there. When you're brazing things, you really want them to be flush. So I'll take a couple minutes or however long trying to get that lined up. And the thing about doing this, you can also use it for ferrules, for knives. You can use it to make same techniques to make collars for other ironwork or steel. Now, this should come right back in. I might have to fiddle with this a little bit more. Figures.
Well, I think it's interesting that because I'm familiar with forge welding, like in a coal fire, and about how the shape that you want is that kind of scarfing one over the other. But in brazing, when you're doing these rings, you really want it to be flat, coming onto each other.
Yeah, flush so and no gap.
Flush and no gaps.
I'd normally do this over a small anvil on a stump, put to the side. I want to feel it and have it feel smooth, not just look smooth. I want it to feel smooth. If I need to, I'll keep moving it back and forth, and that'll help work harden it a little bit, so that way it springs together and stays together up until my fingers can't do it anymore. All right. And naturally, I'm going to have to fight this one a little.
So when you're working it back and forth with your hands, effectively, are you stretching that outside circumference of the metal, but even though it gets work hardened, and that's what ends up eliminating that V into being more flush and butted ends?
Moving it down so it's more at that angle. Moving it down so it's coming in. It makes a V like this, and then I'm moving it like that. So it's
okay.
Yeah. I hope that makes sense. All right.
It does.
So I've got it good or pretty good. I'm gonna look at it, run my fingers along it, make sure it's pretty smooth. Something you can do if you are having problems with this is just go back, grab a saw, grab a jeweler's saw or whatever, and cut. Now, I've just cleared that. Oops. Well, I've almost cleared it. Now that I started it, I have to finish it. And trying to do this and stay in the camera view sort of sucks. All right, I gotta move. All right. I might have to have Bill take and hold the camera.
I have a view of what you're doing. Those in the audience, does anybody need a better view than what we have right now? Just chat and let me know.
All right.
Cool. Russ says, looks good to me.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see mine right there. There, it's through. And now that I did that, both those ends have been abraded to flush. So now I can move it back and forth a little bit, get it to spring together. And then if I need to, can take a file, sanding sponge, whatever, nail file, clean those corners so I get any burr out of the way. Now get this back to flush. All right. You want this to be clean. So some of the time what I do, if I've been holding it and using my fingers quite a bit, is I'll dip it into a pickle. And for pickling it is usually to get the scale off and oxidation. You can use a professional pickle, or I used to use vinegar and salt. And then I just keep it in a tiny crock pot. And I'll show the tiny crock pot later when I do the shop tour. So from here, I'm gonna put that down, get rid of our so-called anvil. And I do have good pads to do this on, but I'm going to go ahead and just do it over the brick, a hard brick, that way to show that you can do that. What I'm going to use for flux is, again, I have good fluxes, but all I did was take an old jelly sample container. I poured in borax, I poured in some water, stir it up before use, and I'm going to paint that around it. I'm going to paint the flux around it to help pull in the solder, and also to help prevent oxidation around the joint.
And for your vinegar and salt mixture pickle, what are the ratios you use for that?
I just put in a bunch of salt into the vinegar and stirred it up and had extra salt.
Nice.
Whatever, to solution. How's that?
Yeah.
I had extra salt, and then I'd heat it up. It works a little better if it's heated up. Otherwise, you can drop it in there and leave it in all night. So I've got this here. Yes.
Yeah. One more question about your flux from Charlie. Are you using sodium borate or boric acid?
I'm just using borax. You can use boric acid, but I'm just using borax, the laundry stuff. Yeah.
20 mule team.
Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and take up a piece of the solder that I cut earlier. On this, I'm using a borax or a bronze solder. And since I drop everything, I've got to drop everything several times, at least. All right. There. I like to dip that into the stuff, but not drop it in. All right. Dip that into the flux too, because then it's more likely to stay when you go to put it down on the outside of the ring. There I go. And I'm going to put that on the crack. And now put this stuff off to the side, put the lid back on there. If I need to, I've got a flux pick here. I rarely use it. I'm going to go ahead and use this torch. So I'm going to turn it on. And I'm going to heat up the outside first. So I'm going to heat the ring, because I don't want to get it too hot and just melt the solder. I want to melt use the ring to melt the solder rather than the torch to melt the solder. So I'm holding it back a little bit and I'm preheating it. And now the flux is starting to dry. And I went and took a ring making class with Stacy Mayer out of Midnight Pacific Studios before I had the surgery on my arm. And prior to that, I was no good at doing brazing. And I did it great during that class. And then I came home and I got all my equipment ready and I started doing it. And I tried to make rings and I failed somewhere between 50 and 100 times in a row over a 2-day period. That's almost all I did on my days off there. Was I tried to do it over and over. Now I've got it hot. I'm bringing it in closer. And start still heating the ring part. I'm moving it back and forth. That way both halves are heating evenly, or both sides of it, of the joint. Sooner or later, you should see the solder puddle. There we go, it's starting to get hot.
And what
since I'm doing it like this right here, I'm using a hard solder. So this is, don't use the solder that you use for plumbing. That's a really soft solder and it will break real quick. So when I did this, I'm using a hard bronze solder. I want the solder is going to flow towards the heat. So I want to move this around a little bit and make sure that the solder flows to the inside of the joint and both sides and stuff. From here, I'm going to turn that off. I've got a little bit of an extra clump in the spot there. I'm going to let it cool down just a little bit, right? Then I'm going to take it. I'm going to drop it in the pickle. It shouldn't take very long in there. And since I'm going to do 2 different rings and I can let that sit in the pickle for a few, I'm going to go ahead and take the silver one and use the my regular setup to do this. So I'm going to put my heating block there. I pre-pickled that earlier. I want to make sure I get rid of the bronze solder. So I don't use that. I'm going to use a silver solder on this. That out of the way. And I keep I cut this solder pieces ahead of time, but then I keep one of those little oxidizer packages you get in food and stuff like that, or deoxidizer packages in there with it to help it out, help keep it from getting oxidized and moist and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and use the same solder. I'm going to go over here, run that around, make sure I get everywhere on the outside, and that includes the inside. Put that down. See if I can do a little bit better job of picking up a piece of solder this time. Nope, of course not. I'm going to just chase them around. I need to invest in a different pair of tweezers. This is a copper tweezers that I use for taking things in and out of the pickle pot and in and out of ferric chloride or liver sulfur or something like that. Oops. Naturally, I dropped that one in the thing. See if I can drop this one in there. All right. I think the tips of this has been bent a little bit, which is making it hard to pick things up. All right. Yep. That's the way I roll. I'm gonna just drop things. I think I got one. All right, I put it in there. I'm gonna put it right there. Yes, I did have one. Ha! Success. Maybe. I'll put this down, move that over to the side, put that there. Now I've got a fan going. Normally I'd have a couple of fans going, especially since the jewelry shop is in my bedroom. So I'm gonna turn this on.
On that note, we do have a question, a further question about solders. You know, somebody had mentioned that that tin, for instance, in the solders, or some solders can have cadmium or lead or some other additives.
Right.
Since these rings go on our skin, do you know the chemical or the alloy of the solder?
It's mostly silver. The bronze one has a little bit of copper. I'm not sure what else is in it, but it's a specifically ones for jewelry. The easy solders and stuff for that. So it better be safe, because otherwise they shouldn't be able to sell it for that.
Yeah.
So this is going a little quicker. Heated everything up a lot quicker with the better torch. I'm starting to move it in. I'm bringing it down. The solder's starting to flow, but it all stayed on the one side. So I'm going to use the pick a little bit and brace my finger, move it over. Yeah, oops. And see how bad I screwed things up there. Now I'm going to flip this over. Make sure I got it, the solder on the back. I do see it on the back, but I'm going to just play it safe and make sure it got through right there. So now I'm good there. Turn that off. Drop that in the pickle pot, and I'll take out the other one, and then I'll be moving the camera over to the anvil. So I'm gonna take it from the pickle pot. Well, in a minute I will, after I clean it up. I'm gonna rinse it out in baking soda and water. Then I'm gonna rinse that off with water. And if I feel I need to, I keep a little rag here to wipe everything off. Then I'm going to take a file. I'll show you the join. So you see the little silver area around it. And I'm gonna file everything flush, inside and outside. All right, thank you, Bill. I'm gonna do this.
Anthony was interested, you mentioned earlier you're using a narrow torch tip, but
Yep.
what, can you describe your torch tip further, or is there more information?
Do you know what size torch tip that was that you had that on your propane thing? Yeah. So I used Bill's for a while, and this one I think was a size 1. It's hard for me to get my eyes to focus on this. This is a Smith torch. 1, yeah. So it's a size 1. I think I've got another size or so. If you want to see how big the opening is, that's in millimeters. And I don't know if anybody can read that, but yeah.
Yes.
It is a size 1 tip. A lot of the propane torches, you can get different size propane torches, and this one's too big. So you can get the torch tip that's a smaller size. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and file this real quick. Filing away from myself. Want to make it nice and smooth. Come over to the other side, flip it over. Yeah. And I'm trying to just make a nice, smooth, sort of rounded motion as I go over it. Moving that down around a little bit. Now I'm going to come into the inside. This one's always a little bit trickier. I prefer not to pull backwards when I'm using the file. And if you're using the files, I don't want to use my jewelry files on steel. The files I do use most of the time are just the cheap little packets of jewelry files. I've got that pretty cleaned up right there. You can use other files. You could use, this is a little cheap little diamond file. Again, you could use memory boards, whatever, I do like to go and get the file marks out. So what I'm going to do when I do that is, this is just a sanding sponge, and I cut a little strip off of it. And the sanding sponges you can get in the hardware stores. This one was in the stuff for doing drywall. They also come in different grades, coarse, medium, rare. Coarse, medium rare. I want medium rare. I'm looking forward to a steak one of these days again. Yeah. As soon as I get rich and infamous, But I'm going over the whole thing. I'm making sure it's all, the whole thing is shined to the same amount. Then you know, you can go over it with the steel wool if you want a little bit more, or Scotch-Brite. This, since we're doing the easy stuff, I think the steel wool might have came out of my woodworking stuff, might have came out of the kitchen. The Scotch-Brite I'm using came out of the kitchen, and I just cut it, a strip of it again. There are different grades of Scotch-Brite, but for this purpose, the kitchen stuff works. All right. And now I'm going to take you over to, I should do the silver one right now too, while we're sitting at the same spot. So I'm going to take that out. That way we don't have to move the camera multiple times. And then we'll just go over and we'll do the stuff separate. From the pickle pot into the baking soda water. And again, I've got more baking soda than will dissolve. So it's past, it's at solution. And I'm just using a Lay's Smooth Ranch. I could have used a different dip.
Hey, come on. No product
Okay.
endorsements here.
Okay. Pickled herring
Except
for the
maybe
other
your
stuff.
herring.
Yes, pickled herrings. All right.
Yes.
So
That's
I
right.
want to clean this up. I'm gonna use the file again. I think I did a really good job here. I might not really need to be using the file on this. Push this that direction. There we go. And since I don't know what hand I'm using at any given point in time, I'm using my left hand for this time because my right shoulder is a little sore. And go there. Oops. It's easier to hold with this hand. I'm going to get confusing, I think, with what hand I'm using for anything, because I don't know what hand I'm going to use until I actually do it at this point. Now, I forgot to do something when I prepped this. And something I would like to do for the inside of the rings, especially when you used flat stock, is cut those inside corners so that way they're not sharp. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. And I'm just using a half round file out of my jewelry file stuff. Cut the corner. Flip it over. Do the same thing on the other side. Yeah, I'm just beveling the inside corners. That way it's a little bit more finger friendly, because you want your stuff to be finger friendly, especially if you want to sell this stuff. You know, if you're giving it away, I'd prefer it to be finger friendly. I don't like wearing jewelry, and I'm much less likely to wear it if it is not finger friendly. So, all right. Back to the, all right, Bill's going to move the camera over. We're going to go back to the bronze ring, and we're going to use homemade equipment.
On that note, I just want to let you know that we have started to auction off your rings. And so we've got a $25 bid for the bronze one and $30 bid for the silver. If anybody else wants to bid, but also if anybody wants to check out Rashelle's work, that you can visit www.rashellehams.com and see the whole variety of things that you produce. Because Rashelle, I know you, but maybe not everybody does, and you produce a wide range of products. So I'm just very impressed.
I don't have so the rings like I'm doing. I'm going to do a faceted one on the bronze, and then I'm going to do a wood grain pattern on the silver one. And then I don't have my hammers on my website for some reason or another. I keep selling them before I get a good picture. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a great problem to have.
You can bring that in. So the ring mandrel here is blacksmith made out of a piece of a 3/4 round 1045. You can use professional ones that you bought. And I use that when I'm trying to size things, because this one has the size gradations on it. You could also use things along the lines of I don't remember where I found this. I do remember pulling it out of a thing, and then I had Billy O straighten it up the other day because I'm not up to swinging my right hand or arm. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop that down right there. I'm just showing that one. I'm gonna put this ring down, and I'm gonna go over to my handmade mallet. Every once in a while, you got to make sure it's on there good. And I don't care if I deform the metal here, because I'm gonna be texturing it later. But I'm gonna straighten this out, and I'm putting it up against a little bump in the log. You could also use a crack in the log, but this angle is not so good for that. So I'm gonna go ahead and straighten it out a little bit. You could, since if I wasn't gonna facet it, I'd do it all right there. Since I am going to facet it and texture it, I'm gonna go ahead and do it over my so-called anvil. And I'm using the other finger to pull it back and keep it tight, right? So from here, I'm gonna flip it over. So that way it doesn't end up tilted in towards your fingers or anything like that. And I'm using the wooden mallet so that way I'm not pre-faceting it. So now I've got it pretty round. I'm turning it. And with this one, since it's a homemade one, maybe I might want to take a Sharpie and put a little line right there somewhere. And then I can always tell when I've worked my way all the way around. But from here, I'm gonna put that down, and I'm gonna use, you could use just a cheap little ball peen hammer, but I can't use that because I didn't make it. So I gotta use my own ball peen hammer. And I'm gonna just use the regular face of it. I'm gonna, again, keep that finger in. And I'll try not to talk when I'm hammering. So I've got one side of it effectively faceted. I'm gonna turn it over again and go the other side. Now again, I could do this like here and get the same result. It's a little bit better on the ears. And I'm using that finger to hold it in place so I know when I've went all the way around. Now, you can do different textures, and I'll show another texture when I do the silver ring. So I'm pretty close to done with that hammer. It's nice and pretty round. I'll get it a little bit more. I'm going to put this down. I'm going to squash it to make sure it's flat. And ideally, you'd polish up the surface of whatever you're using as an anvil. Now I could be using an anvil, right? I could also be using the mallet. Same difference, it's now flat. I'll look at it again, make sure I've got it good and round. If I don't like the roundness, I'll just go back over the over one of the mandrels and come back again. All right. So now I've got a good round. I've got a nice little texture. I'm not sure how well you can see. We will move this stuff up. But
yeah, if you bring it just a little closer and towards the center, I think we were catching some of the
I think the light at the end of it all moves so that the lighting is a little bit better. Okay. There we go.
Excellent.
And I know I saw you could see my dog. But now this just sort of looks plain, you know. I've got a ring. It looks plain. So what I'm going to do is you can use liver of sulfur, lime sulfur that you can get out of the garden supplies. It lasts a little bit longer, but this takes more than a few minutes if you let it soak, or something else. And so I'm going to just use a ferric chloride. I'm a knife maker too, right? So the ferric chloride, the advantage of that is you just put it in a little bit, stir it up a little, and it's already turned funny colors. All of these, again, I'm going to use the same setup for neutralizing it into the baking soda water. Now it's turned colors again into the water to rinse off some of that. And then here I go, and now it's funny looking, right? So I'll take, no, because we'll come back over here for it in a minute. And I'm going to take the Scotch-Brite, or however I want to polish it, go over it. Now I've got a little bit more, a different color, and it's better to me than that just plain yellow color. And if you've got textures where you've got divots into it, it'll show up even more, but it gives another coloration to it. So from here, I'm going to go over to the silver ring. I'm going to put this one right here. Might do a little bit more later, but we're going to come over to the silver ring. Shaka Buddy move. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
That's my Shaka Buddy. Gotta have a picture of the puppies, right? Yeah.
Thank you. We had people asking who your shock helper was.
Yes, that's my shock dog.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, he's still a puppy. Yeah. I'm gonna do roughly the same thing. I'm gonna bring that down. Gonna use, this time I'm gonna use bot stuff. Got a rawhide mallet. Okay, I won't really use a bot hammer. If I'm a hammer maker, there's no way I want to use somebody's bot hammer. All right, I gotta use my own hammers. All right.
Well, and I must know, did you ever hit your finger before you got 100% used to keeping it to the side of the ring form?
Nope, and this is my offhand. But an advantage is I'm holding it from below a little bit, so it's hard to hit my finger. I'd have to come down like that and miss like that in order to hit my finger. So if I'm missing here, I've got all this surface area contact to keep me from missing, unless I move it over here and go, boink. Yeah, like that. Now, I've got my nice round ring and stuff, but that's like really thick and it looks dull to me. So what I'm gonna do, I wanna thin it out. I wanna get a little bit more size. Right now, it's just short of just shy of being a size 7. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that back down. I'm gonna go ahead and use a hammer. I'm gonna stretch it out. Now I could facet it like I did earlier with the other one. In fact, maybe I'll give you the look of faceting it with the ball peen, with the ball of the ball peen, because that's another look people can do. And I'm going side, side, middle, you know. I'm trying to get a good even surface area. And since I'm using the ring mandrel that has graduated markings on it, so that brings that down a little. Now you've got different sets of facets, right? But I sort of like that look. But I was going to, and that stretched it and thinned it out a little. But I wanted to use do the wood grain pattern. So I'm just gonna take my little hammer here. It's rather sharp on the ends. I'm gonna come up to here, make sure that y'all can see. And I'm gonna hold it not perfectly in line. I'm gonna go slightly at an angle. Makes it harder for me to miss. All right. If I need to, I can re-anneal it because it has worked it hardened a little. And again, I'm using my offhand. So if you practice with any hand, and you can see I'm missing a little bit as I go. It's knocking it off to the side. But if you take the time to practice, you can get to where you're using whatever hand whenever you need to. So, all right, I went around once. I don't always like just doing it once. So I'm gonna flip it over, and maybe I want to go the other way. So I'll go a
So
little bit more straight.
Yeah.
What?
Regarding being ambidextrous, did you just wait until you had shoulder surgery before you thought, hey, maybe I should use my other hand? Or was this something that you had practiced and came in handy, no pun intended, but maybe it was, after getting shoulder surgery?
No, it's something that I practiced, well, all my life, to try to keep both hands in. And then when I first started forge welding, I'd frequently set my weld left-handed. And that was helpful. That gave that soft, squishy blow. And so I'd confuse myself as to what hand I was using. And then when I was blacksmithing and I was instructing it, I found that really helpful when you had left-handed students and stuff to be able to show them left-handed. So all along, I'd demo everything right-handed, and then I'd go to the left-handed students and I'd show them left-handed as they needed it. So when I went to their anvil to show them body positioning and the hammer stroke and stuff, I'd use my left. And so it was really helpful for when I hurt my shoulder and I wasn't able to do anything. It was really helpful to just switch over. I went straight into doing Friday I was right-handed, Monday I was left-handed when I did everything at work, and I stayed that way. And now it's a bit over a year later and I'm still left-handed doing this.
Awesome.
I got a question on the work hardening. Is it something that you're seeing? Or is it something that you're feeling?
You can hear it and you can feel it.
Okay,
I
yeah.
can't bend this, I couldn't bend this in my hands. It's now a solid. It's less likely to squash if that don't work with that arm. If it gets squashed, you can hear it a little bit. It'll be more tingier. And you can feel it, and it doesn't want to move as much. So from here, I want to clean up because I was using a sharp edge. I do want to make sure I'm going to use professional stuff this time, right? Oh, so I'm going to use that, and where'd the other Scotch Brite go? There. So I want to make sure I sand away any potential sharp edges from using that sharp piece on there. And then or using the sharp hammer on it, texturing hammer. And I'm gonna just keep going there. Make sure it's good. If I need to, I can go like this. Or if you really need to, take a sanding sponge. Go like that. Go like that. And then work your way up. You do like you normally do with on grits and stuff. I'm just going to go from here straight to the Scotch Brite to help break things down. And then I'm going to drop this in the ferric chloride again. So we'll go ahead and move probably move the camera over, and we can do stuff from here. Now this takes a little bit longer with the silver, which doesn't mean much. I like ferric chloride, but once you've got it contaminated with copper, you tend to have something to do copper plating. But it doesn't last, right? It's a very thin plating. I did do that on a couple of knives, though. So I've done it through my baking soda and through the water. Now I've got a nice dark colorings and stuff here. I'm going to use the Scotch Brite again. Oh, so this is the heavy duty Scotch Brite rather than the stuff out of my kitchen. Yeah, I could use old belts too. But I'm just going over. I'm not trying to get everything cleared out. And now I have a little bit of a wood grain pattern. And I can soak this a little bit more to get that pattern to show up a little bit better. But
Tell
I
you
don't know
what,
how well everybody's
Rashelle,
seeing.
kind of angle it away from the light, and then pull it back. So yeah, let's do that mandrel. We tried.
Yeah.
And then,
And here's the other one earlier. Yeah.
okay. So here, and just hold those steady. We'll see if that'll pick up. Yeah, just nice and slow. I think I'm seeing the texture coming through. If y'all see that, that's beautiful. Oh,
Thank
you
you.
got 35 on the silver ring now. That's awesome.
Yeah. But there's those two. If you do it a little different on the silver, so this is what I did the other day. Oops. There, that does the wood grain a little bit better. And I'll probably go over this one and I'll soak it a little bit longer so that it shows it better. Yeah. So it'll look more like the one right here.
Indeed.
And I don't know how well that's showing. All right. Some
Have
of the
you
other
ever
things
made
people,
rings? Oh, go on.
yeah. Well, what I was gonna say is some of the other things you can do is practice doing animal heads and stuff, you know,
Oh.
and then make rings like that. Well, this
Oh my
one is
gosh.
not done. I messed up on the ear, but I got a little bear and what will be a little wolf if I don't toss it. It's a
Awesome.
dragon. Yes, that's what it
Yes.
is. It's a dragon and a bear. Yeah.
That's so cool. Did you cut that first, the outline from copper plate or
No,
sheet?
I took, and this is how a good way to practice. Just go get some copper ground wire and practice making rings. And so what I did was I took the copper ground wire, I then squashed it so I had flat stock because I wanted a flat ring. And then I forged the end. Well, I forged it flat, and then I forged the end the same way you would do a two-dimensional animal heads. So I'm going to do some with raptor heads and bears. Eventually, I'm going to get the wolf down pat. This one needs a little work. It's a dragon. Yeah. Nobody can't tell me it's not a dragon because nobody can tell me for sure what that dragon is supposed to look like. Because they can't tell me they've seen the dragons in person, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
That's so cool.
any questions? You were starting to ask a question.
Well, I was interested, and if anyone has any questions or comments, please leave them in the chat section. But I'll ask Rashelle this now. I have heard about, we all are familiar with the values of metal. Gold is, you know, the most worthful, and then it's silver and bronze and down the list to copper. And I understand historically that has been linked to what cultures had available around them versus what was imported in. And so maybe in some cultures that silver was more coveted than gold or vice versa, however it works. However, from a welding standpoint, I was explained that our current value system is based on the fact, and I want you to check this with your own experience, is that copper can weld steel and copper together. It can braze steel and copper together. Bronze can braze steel, copper, and bronze together. Silver can braze steel, copper, bronze, and silver together. But gold is the only one that can weld all of those materials. And so have you ever heard that before? That's kind of how we place gold at the top.
I don't know, but I do know that it's silver solder, and it's a silver solder that's based for doing the bronze and the copper rings, also with a little bit of copper in it. I do know they work. I just can't afford gold, so I haven't figured that out for myself yet. A little bit more costlier. But if somebody wants to buy some and give it to me to play with, I'll be happy.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. If I stumble across some, you're gonna be the first person I send it to, okay?
Okay, yeah.
Uh, Well, if there are no other questions, and I don't know if there are any other bids, I believe that we have $30 on the bronze and then 35 on the silver ring. And so once we close this meeting out, we'll be able to do that. But I just say, Rashelle, that's so awesome. Thank you so much for doing this demonstration. And were you interested in doing a little tour of your setup?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. As soon as I
Yeah.
move the dog out of the way, we'll go ahead and do
Okay.
a shop tour. Shaka buddy? No.
Yeah.
He's right behind
And
my
Dawn
chair.
says,
He stands to,
thanks so much for,
yes. He stays with me.
Dawn Kay says, thanks,
Um,
Rashelle, very good.
You're welcome. And so we'll go over the jewelry setup first, since that's where we're at. So,
Oh, also, sorry I missed it, but Lee said that that dragon looks exactly like to the second to last dragon that he saw. So he can confirm
there we
that your
go.
dragon
We
is on.
got confirmation.
Mhm.
So got little storage areas and stuff. It's sort of cluttered right here because I was doing multiple things. I've got more metal down there and a box of tools. This is the setup that I used, was just a stump, a bunch of hammers, a little anvil, a little piece of steel to use as an anvil. You go over, oops, I don't need to be showing you all my bed or anything like that, but yeah. And there's the photo booth for taking pictures. Not that I'm any good at that. But I'm gonna take you all out to the powered shop, which has the press and stuff in it. I'm not sure how well the picture taking is, but we've got.
Yeah. If you kind of go
Yeah.
to the machine, then or go to something and hold it steady, it's all kind of shaky through the movement.
All right. There's a desk under there with a bunch of equipment and stuff off to my right. We've got Bill's belt sander there. We've got a 51-inch Gen Chem, the 25-ton press. Take the forge in and out, one of the anvils and stuff. And here, the smaller 21-inch heat treat oven. My my belt sander. And I'll try to stay still here and try not to have my fingers. I don't know what finger is over the camera. There, that finger is over the camera apparently. So that's the powered shop. And take you outside to the non-powered shop.
Second. We have a question.
Yeah.
Why? Because I know one of the newest and most fun machines in that shop is that forging press. Why did you choose a forging press over a power hammer?
Well, one, I live in a residential area. Two, I needed to be able to have a lot of control because I would be doing this one-handed without my right arm. I knew I was going to be SOL as far as the use of my right arm, and I needed to have income coming in, and I wanted to be able to do hammers. When I figured I could do whatever I do with a hammer, I could do with the press, just might take a little bit slower and a little bit longer, but that I could still do it, and then I'd have enough control. And one of the things I wanted was to make sure that I could have enough control using my foot. Like the dog's head is doing a lot of work there, using my foot as opposed to my arm. And then I could hold everything with the left and then just switch out dies. And it's,
Thank you.
oh yeah.
And just so you know, Lynn Moore said, thank you for such a great demo. I know we're going to walk to your outside shop, but he found it very interesting. And Anton and Kate from Russia, they say, thanks a million, Rashelle. Great job. The rings are awesome. So,
Thank you all.
Yeah, and there was a question for Lee. I don't know if he saw it, so I'll ask from Billy O. It was, what was the title of the heat treating reference you suggested last week? So Lee, if you hear that question and are still in the audience, welcome to Rachelle's Outside Shop.
So, got the shop here, a little bit of storage and stuff here. And what I did was I wanted to have an outside shop sooner rather than later. So I got one of the event type tents that was highly rated and that I can take the doors up and down on, shaka mode. And some of the, I haven't cleaned up. I haven't been doing too much out here because of my arm. And so everything is sort of rather disorganized at the moment. And due to me inadvertently leaving the doors up, it's a little bit rusty out here at the moment. Sooner or later, I'm going to put up a drill press, the hand crank drill press and stuff like that. I have that sitting in the metal storage area. And we've got the metal storage area here coming up in the other building. Yes. And whatever I need for making hammers and whatever else, knifey stuff. And Bill's storage of wood for handles. And then some other forges and stuff, hand cranked and like that. And I think everybody should have some form of punching bag for stress relief. And so there we go. Yeah. All right. That concludes my tour. I'm going to get out of the rain. I walked in between the rain and the place. And we'll go back in.
Yeah. Well, and so Lee wrote Tool Steel Simplified is the book that Billy had asked about. So if anybody wants to write that down. But also, Rashelle, you have offered to do another demo for us later on at some point. And so I feel like because we've done it before, we could sit down and just talk for a while, but I'm going to save some of my questions for your next demo. For anyone who isn't aware, Rashelle has competed on both Forged in Fire and Knife or Death. And so, you know, she does things that are even more intense than the average teenager does, I think. And so we can get into some of those deeper questions at another time. But is there anything else that you'd like to share that we forgot to cover, Rashelle?
I bet about 5 minutes after you turn the recording off, all sorts of things are going to pop into my head because that's the way I roll.
I feel it. So one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to ask you to take a picture of that ring size chart. Could you send that to me? And I could post that on our members only forum. So the ring blank sizing chart. Yeah.
And you can find that online.
Information to share. Certainly, I will. I certainly will.
Something I do want to bring up is I like when people are learning or practicing and stuff like that, I like to go from small to large and then back to small, because smaller tends to be more technically difficult, larger is more physically difficult. And so if you take your skills and start doing some small stuff like rings and stuff like that, get those techniques down, and then bring it into your larger stuff, you tend to be even better at doing the larger stuff because you've been working on the little tiny scale stuff for a while.
Oh, that's such an excellent point. And that's just, there are a million reasons why I think you are both an outstanding smith and an outstanding human being, because it's one thing to learn and interpret the processes ourselves, but guiding others, especially the youngest of us, through it, that's its own special technique and process that you've also mastered, I think. So bravo all around. And Jim Carley says, great demo. Thanks so much, Rashelle. Patricia said, thank you, Rashelle. Great demo. Russ Smalley, thank you so much. Rashelle, Bhakti, thank you. Everybody is loving what you did today, and we look forward to the next one that you bestow upon us. So I'll go ahead, I guess. Yeah, we'll say goodbye and wave. I will keep the room open. I'm going to return back to my screen and we'll sign off, but I'll keep the room open for a little bit too. If anyone wants to hang out and say hi, I can unmute mics and all that. So thank you again, Rashelle. Kellen says, thanks, great job. Lee says, awesome demo, thank job. Thanks, you did a great job. You're amazing. So we'll
You're
see
welcome.
you.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you next time, Rashelle.
Everybody have a
Oh.
good weekend.